begin to counteract this self-pity me that thinks I didn't ask to get born, and concrete, solid, inherent self-pity, hopeless me where life is good luck and bad luck, which is all a load of rubbish, which is the view of ego. But by thinking about karma, we gradually get the deeper point that actually being the first level of dependent arising, cause and effect, it starts to help us grow up, to give up the victim, give up blame, give up attachment, anger, jealousy, pride. We're not even working on it directly yet, but it begins to help us do that. And then we move to the second scope, where we start to look at how we're sick of, fed up with suffering, and we get to the root of the problem, and we start to unpack and unravel and get rid of all the branch delusions. But again, the implicit teaching, which is leading us to getting us more clear about dependent arising when we get there, is to start to understand this deeper point that not only are all these neuroses disturbing emotions, but they're delusional. As Lama Zopa says, all these delusions, all these emotional afflictions, as they call them in the texts, all these mental illnesses, besides having the function of making us very miserable and causing us to do dumb actions with our body and speech, which cause future suffering, but actually we start to see how they're all liars, they're misconceptions. As Lama Zopa says, they decorate on top of what already is there, layers upon layers upon layers of characteristics that aren't there. So all these delusions, we start to really understand how attachment and anger and all the other thousands of nonsense in the mind are disturbing, but the crucial function is they're liars, they're misconceptions, they cause us to be delusional. They cause us to be out of sync with reality. And then we get to the Bodhisattva path and we start to get bodhicitta, and then we go to the 6 perfections and we go through all the work of, as I said, the proactive work of benefiting sentient beings. And then we get to the 5th of the 6 perfections, and finally the 6th one. And our minds are really ready, are primed and ready. We understand dependent arising already by understanding cause and effect. An example of the first level of cause, first level of dependent arising, as we've been talking. And then as we just started to discuss, before we looked into actually how now we're going to be able to unpack and unravel the lies in the mind, the particular lie called ignorance that has this double trouble lie, that not only does it cause us to not know how the I and everything else exists actually, but we've made up this lie on top that believes the exact opposite, which is that they all have an intrinsic nature. So not only do we not know the reality that there's no intrinsic nature, we believe in the exact opposite. So this double trouble ignorance is what keeps us paralyzed in samsara. So we've been pairing our minds beautifully by realizing, thinking about cause and effect, which loosens the grip of ego grasping already, then thinking about how the delusions already are liars, the branch delusions, we begin to give them up, and then we add bodhicitta to the mix, and now we're ready to completely cut the root of all the nonsense. Our minds are primed beautifully to realize emptiness. So as we discussed, already, we're looking at the king of logics to prove emptiness is dependent arising. So a marvelous way of presenting how things exist ultimately is in the framework of how things exist conventionally. And this is one, and as Tsongkhapa, his marvelous poetic song of praise to the Buddha for his teachings on dependent arising, he makes it so clear that that's why they call it the king of logics. Lama Yeshe paraphrasing, the king of logics. And it's the guaranteed way to lose the plot and not to make the major mistake, as Tsongkhapa says, of falling into the abyss of the great mistake. When we hear emptiness, we hear nothing. And then we hear dependent arising, we hear something. So each exaggerates, they're both, one over-exaggerates and gives things an ontological kind of status they don't have, and the other one under-exaggerates, and we chuck the baby out the bathwater and fall into the abyss of the great mistake and want to kill ourselves. Well, there's no I, what the hell? The biggest mistake is that one. So we looked a little bit at how we need to argue with these misconceptions. So we've already looked at cause and effect. So in relation to the I, that's karma, thinking this way. But the second one we went into is, Buddha's telling us we're making 2 major mistakes. We either think there is an I that's separate from the other bits and pieces in this second level of dependent arising, or we think that everything is the I. So we've looked a little bit at the argument of how there can't be a separate piece, like that, the example of IKEA. You buy a box of Robina, you buy a box of, Catherine, and very well they've learned how to construct a proper person, so they've got all the hundreds and thousands of correct bits, and each bit does its job. You construct the Robina, but you're still looking anxiously for the little piece in that box called me, because we're convinced there has to be a piece in there called I that runs the show, that is the boss, without which there won't be an I. And Buddha says a load of rubbish. You don't need one, dears. Not only will you not find a piece called I, IKEA haven't made a mistake. You don't need one. And how you prove that to yourself, it's a really good exercise. How you prove that to yourself is by looking at each piece that makes up the I, and there's thousands of bits. We know they're all divided into the mind and the body. But each of those pieces, like I said with IKEA with a table, IKEA just doesn't chuck in 5 legs and 49 screws and you cross your fingers and hope for the best. They've worked it out and they give you the exact number of screws, the exact number of legs, the correct number of everything. So it'll make up a perfect table. Same with the person. You've got each piece, exactly 4 fingers, 1 thumb, each big of ligaments, the right amount of eyes, ears, toes, pee-pee, caca, blood, bones, you name it. Put them all together, and we're keeping thinking as we're looking for where's the I, where's the piece called I in this box. They've made a mistake, and you ring up having a panic attack. There's no I in the box. IKEA says you don't need one, baby. You made a mistake. And you don't need one because all the bits, this is the point, do perfectly doing their job. You don't need a boss. This is Buddha's main view. He says you don't need a creator. So we've got one view, which is you need a creator to run the universe. It's like a conspiracy theory. You don't need a bloody boss. Excuse me swearing here, just a gentle swear. You don't need a boss, Buddha says. We all do fine creating our own suffering and our own happiness. Well, the same inside here, we don't need a boss. It's just the philosophy of an I is the same philosophy as a creator, something intrinsic and inherent that runs everything. It's a made up nonsense. You don't need it, and we've got to prove it. So this analysis of the parts, looking for the piece called I among those parts, you won't find one. You don't need one. But as His Holiness said, as I said, the I isn't empty of existing intrinsically because you can't find one, because you won't find one. But that's not the real premise. The I is empty because it is a dependent arising. So this is the point. The simple example I used before of I have a mala and a thermos, 3 phenomena, okay? Separate and independent, easy peasy. Mala doesn't exist in dependence upon me or the thermos. Thermos doesn't exist in dependence upon me or the mala, etc. So they're existing independently and separately. One can drop dead, the others are fine. Now, same, I have a nose and an ear. Slightly more nuanced. The ear doesn't depend upon the nose. The nose can be cut off, ear's fine. Ear's no good, but nose is fine. But what about the eye? We believe there's a third piece called I in here somewhere that is like a crucial piece, the owner piece, the boss piece. But like I said, logically, if there were a separate I, like there's a separate nose, when the ear gets hurt, the eye won't mind. If there's a separate I, it has to be independent, doesn't it? You have to point out there's the I, and the eye is looking on feeling very sorry for the poor ear when it gets hurt, and the eye is looking on feeling very sorry for the nose when it gets hurt, if it were separate and independent. But it's more nuanced than that. There is an I, but not from its own side. There is an I, but it's not the parts. So as Lama Tsongkhapa says, the label I, the I is the label. The I can't be the parts. So why not? So this is the other argument. We think all of it's the I. Or I am my nose, and my ear is my eye, my nose is my eye, my eyes are my eye. It's all of me is I. Well, that means I am the parts. Well, like right back to the beginning, remember we said we had to define something. So what's the definition of Robina? Think simply, Robina is the name we give to a bunch of parts. Robina is made up of body and mind. So then if you say, well, I am my mind, well, excuse me, you just define I as being the name we give to a combination of body and mind. So how can Robina be the I as well? How can Robina be the I? It's a different definition. I is a part of Robina. So it can't be the same. So the I and the parts are not the same. They are dependent. Robina depends upon parts, but the existence of parts is independent upon Robina too, but you can't separate them. They're independent. They're dependent, but they're not separate. They're dependent, but not separate. So these are the words we've got to learn to think about, and then put meat on the bones of these words, get an experience of these words. The words are the starting point. And then so this is the words. So we go home and we get our concentration, and then we go to the second mode of meditation. We get our concentration, and we remember these words, and we speak them through clearly in our mind with concentration. And then at some point we'll get, oh, the penny will drop. You get a feeling, wow, you get a taste of emptiness, and you catch it, and you focus on that experience. That's how you combine the 2 types of meditation in one session. Then the feeling weakens and you go back to the analysis. You do more analysis, more thinking, it triggers more insight. So the more you get concentration, the more you have a better analysis, the deeper the analysis, the deeper the insight, and the longer you can hold until eventually one day, the penny will drop all the way. And you'll have your first direct, non-conceptual insight into the fact that there never has been, isn't, and never could be that kind of fantasy I, an I that's independent. Kind of such a thing. When you get that first, your non-conceptual direct insight, that's when you cut the root and you can't fall back after that. You can only go forward. You start climbing out of your samsara into your nirvana. You've got more work to do, but you can't fall back after that. We've had bodhicitta probably in past lives. You can even lose bodhicitta. We've had calm abiding countless lifetimes, lost count. We've never realized emptiness. That cuts the root. Then you've got to keep working, perfecting that realization by adding bodhicitta to it and becoming a Buddha. So let's stop there. Now let's look at the word emptiness, because we get extremely confused about this word. Let's look at the word emptiness. What's it mean? Well, the crucial thing to start with, like I said before, you've got to learn, you've got to start, when you start to study Buddhist psychology, Buddhist philosophy, you learn these terms that refer to that which exists. This is a really crucial point. So like I said, there's several synonyms: object, phenomenon, existent, established base, several synonyms. So the point is this: whatever can be the definition of an existent, this shows the centrality of mind in Buddhism. The definition of an existent is that which can be cognized by mind. So it's axiomatic in Buddhism that which can be cognized by mind is that which exists. So that's what makes it exist. This is the point. Mind is also some extra piece separate from existence. Existence is is contingent upon mind. So whatever exists can be cognized by mind. And Buddha's telling us right now we're living in la-la land because our mind has made up things that don't exist. So a delicious cup that, is beautifully designed and intrinsically delicious, as if somehow deliciousness is along with the plastic and the metal, which is how the cup appears to me, the thermos. That doesn't exist here. A thermos does exist, but not the thermos I think. Attachment embellishes deliciousness onto it, and the ignorance embellishes intrinsic nature onto it. So as Lama Zopa says, delusions decorate on top of what is there, layers and layers and layers of characteristics that aren't there, but we can't see we're doing that. So we've got to strip away the lies. So whatever exists can be cognized by mind. So now let's look. There's Kerry, and they say he's colorblind. Poor bloke, his eyes have been wrong all his life. And black is what we all agree in English. We've accepted the definition of black. The lighting is correct. We all know that's called black, and we agree. We shake hands, the definition. We're all agreement, so we can all discuss black and we can imagine it. We know. We accept this as black. But Kerry's eyes are wrong, and it appears pink to him, and it's appeared pink all his life. So there's a disconnect, isn't there? He might even hear that it's black, but he doesn't see black, so he keeps forgetting. We can kind of bully him into remembering it's black, but it's very distressing for him because it appears pink and he'd like to get rid of the problem, please. So we know we fix his eyes. It's a simple example. We fix his eyes. We fix his eyes. So, okay, in his mind, there's been the belief all his life of pink. In his mind, it's programmed. He sees pink. It appears pink. He believes pink. So we fixed his eyes now. And now we're going to show him the black again. Well, guess what's going to happen? He won't just go, oh, that's interesting, that's black. He'll get the shock of his damn life. He will have a complete panic attack. He'll go, oh my God, it's not pink. Won't he do that? I mean, this is a really powerful point. Okay, I think this, okay. So what I'm getting at is he believes in something that doesn't exist. He's expecting something that doesn't exist. We fix the mistake. So the first thing he's going to notice is, my God, it's not black. It's not pink. He'll get a shock. Now, that's a kind of a shock that's an okay shock. But what if it's 1,000? He thinks it's 5,000 pounds in his bank. He's going to come on pilgrimage with me when we have our next pilgrimage. Maybe it's 2030. Who knows the way the world is going. We'll have to go in wheelchairs. So he's got his 5,000 pounds in the bank and he knows it's there. He's saved it. He's looked after it. He's saved it up. He knows it's there. He can see it. He can taste it. And he wants to get the 5,000 pounds out and pay for his pilgrimage. Just pretend. And he looks in the bank And what appears to him first is zero. And he got the shock of his life. My God, where's my precious £5,000, he'll say. So let's name the phenomenon. You see, the mind cognizes nouns. The mind cognizes nouns, basically, objects, phenomena, events, things, people. Nouns, really, is a way to put it. That's how the mind cognizes. It cognizes nouns. So what's the name of the noun of when he says, oh my God, it's not pink? It's called the absence of pink. What's the noun, the name for what he cognizes when he sees there's no $5,000? It's called the absence of £5,000. So there's a phenomenon called the absence of £5,000. There's a phenomenon called the absence of pink. So who was the person who would cognize the absence of £5,000? The only person who will cognize in that bank the phenomenon called the absence of £5,000 is the person who expects £5,000. I think there's tea in my thermos and I go to drink and I go, oh, my cup's empty, I'll say. Oh my God, my bank account is empty. Of what? £5,000. My cup is empty. Of what? Tea. If I'm living with Kerry for 47 years as my partner and I come home and I find a note, I've left you for a younger version, what will I notice, if not for the rest of my life? The absence of Kerry. If you come to visit me and you've never heard of Kerry, you will never in a million years ever cognize the phenomenon called the absence of Kerry, because you don't expect Kerry. You will never know. You don't walk into the China shop, you know, to buy your china. I say that in America, they don't know what China is. Anyway, China, you know, you buy your cups and saucers. You don't go, oh, mummy, all the cups are empty. No one would say that. Because why? You don't expect tea to be in a cup in the shop. So the point about the absence of something is only the phenomenon called the absence of something. This is not a joke. This is serious, correct words. It's a real phenomenon that does exist for certain people who expect the opposite to be there. Kerry expects pink. I expect Kerry. He expects his £5,000, and then he sees there isn't the £5,000. I see there isn't Kerry. I see there isn't tea. I get a shock because I'm expecting it. So what I cognize is we cognize the absence of the thing we thought was there. So they're not happy absences. Let's say Kerry goes to the doctor and they say he's got cancer. So he comes home to his wife and 7 children, and he's just young and handsome and gorgeous, and life is perfect and everything is at the peak of his life and money coming in. He's got his whole life to look forward to. He is shattered. He can't believe, my God, I'm going to die, you know. So he's shattered, has to get over the pain of the discovery of this incredible suffering of cancer, and he's got to come to terms with it. And then he's getting through this pain and agony because he believes in the presence of cancer. So and then he goes to the doctor again, and she says, oh, I made a mistake. The wrong X-ray. You haven't got cancer. What will Kerry then realize? He'll get this incredible blissful realization of the absence of cancer. What a joy. Well, I don't have cancer, but I've never expected I've got cancer. So I don't cognize the absence of cancer. So the absence of something isn't just some mere nothingness. The absence of something will only exist for a person who expects the opposite. Think about this. Well, that's what emptiness of the inherent I is. We have believed for eons in the presence of a real, intrinsic, definite, findable, pointable, independent I. But the point is, we've never thought that's what we've believed in. We've never even thought of it. But everything is based upon that misconception, Buddha says. The entire universe, the entire hell realms, God realms, spirit realms, human realms, animal realms, everything, formless form, everything is built on is constructed on the belief in a thing that has never, doesn't, and could never exist. So when, as Lama Zopa says, when the yogis, the best yogi, the pretty good yogis, when they realize the absence, they see nakedly the absence of the I they thought was there, they get incredible fear, a good fear. But the best yogis have complete bliss. That I, that they know all their suffering from eons of lifetimes has been built upon, has never, does not, and could never exist. And so this is a more dramatic absence. Tea could exist, £5,000 could exist, Kerry as my husband could exist, pink could exist, but an inherent I could never exist. It's a more dramatic absence. So emptiness is not just therefore just nothingness. You chuck out all the bits of the body, oh, there's no I there, might as well die, you know. No. And this is the good point. He asks me to look in his bank. I don't expect £5,000. I look in the bank and I'll just tell him the truth. There's zero. That's nihilism. There are no pounds there. But look at what Kerry sees. So the object, the phenomenon that appears to my mind is called £0. The phenomenon that appears to Kerry's mind is the absence of £5,000. Please see how they're completely different phenomena. That's why emptiness isn't merely nothing. Emptiness is the absence of what you thought was there. As His Holiness says, as I quoted twice before, the I in here, is not empty because you can't find one. You won't find an independent piece called I, but that's not the real premise. Because what you will then conclude that the I does exist, but as a dependent arising. So dependent arising is what you realize after you've realized emptiness. So it's the same here. It's the same here. Kerry has thought it's pink. We fix his eyes, we fix his mind. He now first gets the shock and sees the absence of pink, but then he sees what is there, which is the black. It's not like, oh, there's no pink, I might as well kill myself. He then realizes the truth, it's black. That's just a simple example. Emptiness is not referring to nothingness. This is the biggest mistake. It's the abyss of the great mistake, and we can't help but hear that when we hear there's no I from its own side. It's more nuanced. That's why I've got to see it in the framework of the two truths, Tsongkhapa says. And this is in the Heart Sutra. Buddha tells us. So what the Heart Sutra is, isn't it, is Buddha sitting there blissing out in meditation. This is how he gave many of his teachings, apparently. And he's sitting there in meditation, absorbed in the profound perception, and then he's channeling his thoughts into the mouths and minds of Shariputra and 10th level Bodhisattva Avalokitesvara, and they're having a chat. Buddha's sitting there blissing out, and they're having the chat, but it's Buddha's teaching. So what basically what Avalokitesvara tells Shariputra is, he asks, how do you practice the perfection of blah, blah, blah. He says, well, you got to, and he basically lists all the phenomena according to the Buddhist worldview, all the 5 aggregates, the 12 noble, the 12, what do you call them? 12 links, the 4 noble truths, the this, the that, the this, the that, and how each one of these, and is spoken, the Heart Sutra apparently is spoken from the perspective of the yogi in concentration on meditation. There is no this, no that, no this, no that. So one of the first things he says, he takes the first of the 5 aggregates, which is called form. The aggregates is just from Buddha's teaching about what we're made up of. We're made of these 5 different pieces. And the first one is form, which is referring to the physical matter. So Avalokitesvara says, form is empty. Then he says emptiness is form. Then he says form is nothing other than emptiness, and emptiness is nothing other than form. So what does he mean? He means exactly these 2 truths. Okay, listen to this. Listen to this. Black cup is empty of pink. And wherever you find emptiness of pink, you will find right there the black cup. So black cup is emptiness, black cup is emptiness of pink is black cup. Wherever there's black cup, there's emptiness, and wherever there's emptiness of pink, there's black cup. That's a fact. Same here. Exactly the same. Because emptiness of inherent existence is a characteristic of something that exists. Black, you can talk about black in general, can't you? Oh yeah, black exists, but you've got to be specific. If you want to have a cognition of black, you need a thing that has the characteristic of black in front of your eyes. Emptiness of inherent existence is existent, definitely. But if you want an experience of the emptiness of inherent existence, you need a conventional phenomenon that has the characteristic of emptiness of inherent existence. So you can't have one without the other, is what the Heart Sutra is telling us. You can't have one without the other. You can't have black without thermos, and you can't have absence of pink without a black thermos. So absence of inherent existence of an I exists right there on the conventional I. 2 truths. Can't have them separate. That means you can never fall into the abyss of the great mistake, Tsongkhapa says. That's why it's the king of logics, to prove emptiness. So anyway, are there any questions before we continue? Any old question at all? Just touch on a few points, okay? All I've done is touch on a few points. We can go into it more, but just touch on a few points. Looking at the meaning of the word emptiness so we don't get confused. Looking at how it comes together with the conventional reality. Looking at how we've got at the moment, we've got the two extreme views. When we hear emptiness, we hear nothingness. When we hear dependent arising, we hear somethingness. Both are exaggerating.
And Robina, Brian's put his hand up. You know, we
Yes,
had
Brian.
a question before.
But he had his hand up last time. You got the question, Brian?
Yes,
Brian.
actually.
Good, your question, darling.
It's my partner, Carolina. She has a question for you.
Yes, good. Fantastic. Talk to me.
Yes. I have lived for several years a situation that I never encountered before. I work now in a public institution, and it's one of corruption. And I try to lead by example, but they are extremely good. They've been doing the things that they do to harass employees so they leave, that they do it very well. To get proof is very hard. And I think finally, even though I changed from one area to another, they still do it. I find that finally they realize that I understand their system and their level of corruption, but and I have put it in writing in a very kind way, not in a way. But it still continues. So I am at a point that I think I may need to maybe hire a lawyer. And I say, is that being Buddhist or not?
Sweetheart, it's a question of, it's common sense, you know. If you are confident, first of all, the main thing that we should know for our own benefit, forget about other people's benefit. The first main thing, the most important thing to remember is that anything we do or say or think for our benefit should be based on a valid, good motivation. It can't be based on anger or attachment or resentment or bitterness or wanting to hurt people. Otherwise, you're harming yourself. Forget about harming other people. So you can see corruption. Well, join the universe, honey. Look at the world. The world is a pretty horrible place sometimes. People rape and murder and drop bombs and kill and steal and lie. Do you not agree with that? It's a pretty horrible. People do terrible things to each other. Do you agree?
Yes.
So, okay, so you got to recognize that. And you happen to be working for a community, a group that is also corrupt. So join the universe, honey. Something surprising. But you're concerned with this one because it's your job. So, honey, if you can go tomorrow and fix the corruption in a particular country and stop them and make them turn around and become a nice people, please go for it. I'll pay your airfare. If you can stop people raping and murdering, I'll help you do it. If you can stop this company from being corrupt, then go for it, baby. So you have to have the wish to want to point out this, but you also got to have the wisdom to know that you've got the power and the means to do it. So, you know, you've got to work that out. Don't be surprised at this corruption. Why are you acting surprised? I'm not being cynical. The world, people do terrible things to each other. So if you can do something to change it, please persevere. But don't expect things to change. If it's so entrenched, don't hold your breath. You'll just get disappointed. That's not being cynical. So you either decide that it's beneficial to stay and to try and change things. But if you really see, if it's that entrenched and it's been this way for so long, do you really believe you can achieve that? And if you can, then you've got to be prepared for the suffering and the sacrifice it's going to encompass. Or, honey, you decide this is enough, I can't handle it. I wish I could change it, but I can't, and I'm going to leave and get another job. So you have to decide. And the reason to do both is got to be valid, virtuous reasons for your own sanity. Otherwise, you will go mad. And what do you achieve? Nothing often. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you. Thank you.
Okay, good, darling. What else, people?
Venerable Robina, can I ask a question?
Yes, sweetheart, go for it.
Okay, this is about emptiness, what you were talking about.
Good, okay, what's the question?
Okay, boy, I'm kind of grasping where you're going.
Good, wonderful.
But there's also a disconnect. And I had, when I first started getting heavily into meditation, I just came across it on my own just by going on YouTube and,
Yes.
help myself. And I came
Right.
across Eckhart Tolle, and then I learned about Buddhism, and then
Yes.
he actually told me about it to get into it.
Yes.
But
Good.
when I'm reading him or hearing his lectures and whatnot, and
Who are you talking about? Who?
Eckhart Tolle.
Oh, okay, good, very good. So what's the question, Brian?
Well, the question is I honestly, I feel like I have had in the very beginning when I was into meditation and I didn't know anything about it.
You
I
what?
feel like that I had a little bit of a
Taste.
touch,
Yeah, this can happen.
a taste. Yes.
This
And it
can happen,
was
Brian. It's very good. It's encouraging. But what you've got to do if you're on the Buddhist path, you've got to do the unpacking and the unraveling and all the work that I've described the last 2 days to really get to it in a very coherent way. Getting a taste is a bit like you've got a potential for music, but you know no theories. You sit at the piano and you twiddle around and a lovely sound comes out because you've got a taste of music. And I say, oh, that's lovely music, Brian. Play it again. Oh, no, I can't do that. It was just a feeling. It's not enough, is it? You've got to go back to basics and learn musical theory so that you can play it every single time. So that's what's telling you. You've got a connection maybe with Buddhism. You've got a familiarity with these ideas. You get a bit of a flash. You've got to not just keep getting flashes. You've got to go back to basics and learn the path. Of course, if you want to. If you don't want to, that's okay. That's very common for all of us, but it's not enough. You've got to get it stably so it's a real, genuine realization. Do you understand my point?
yes, absolutely.
Good. So just keep
Yeah.
moving. Keep moving. If you like the Buddhist teachings, keep
you know,
working.
What it frustrates me though is sometimes I feel like I'm going a little mad.
Well, then obviously you're on the wrong track if you're going a bit mad. It should be leading you to happiness, not suffering.
Well, I mean, in the sense when I'm trying to, I guess because I had that little.
Yeah, but don't get caught up in the flash. Just like I said before.
That's what I think I'm doing.
No, that's what happens to us, Brian. You wanted to get the flash back. You can't get it back until you get the theories right. Then you can play music every time on the piano with confidence. Hear the point. You can't rely on momentary flashes of experience. That's what people think of spiritual, and it's naive. You get my point?
Yes, absolutely. Loud and clear.
Keep studying, honey. Keep studying the theories, and one day they'll turn into experiences, one step at a time. It's very methodical and gradual. And be relaxed with the process and enjoy it.
Thank you so much.
Good, Brian. Thanks, sweetheart. What else, people? Any questions? About emptiness, about anything, in fact? Huh? Nothing? We've got an hour and a half. We've got to fill it up with something. Okay, so let me talk more. So, okay, like I've been doing all the time, what we've been doing, like I'm talking about the whole path. That's why I keep stressing we've got to do the whole path. Can I just leap into this bit here? You've got to start with understanding karma. This begins to help you understand dependent arising and why. Let's look at that again. Let's look right at why is karma an example of dependent arising. Dependent arising means that things don't exist in isolation, don't exist separately, don't exist set in stone. We don't exist in an island. Things exist interdependently. So the feeling of ego, check, like I've been saying already, the feeling of I is I'm an innocent victim. I, concrete I. Bad things happen to me, I don't know why. Good things happen to me, I don't know why. Everything seems like good luck and bad luck. In other words, it's sort of like you don't know botany, but you look at your garden every day and things pop up and you've got no idea why. You've never heard of flowers and weeds. You've no idea about the causes. So you have all these superstitious views about why flowers pop up. Because at 10 o'clock, the church bell rang and a flower came. So forevermore, you think a flower comes because the church bell rang. You've got this superstitious nonsense in your mind about why flowers come. We don't know why. We run around life having a panic attack, don't know why bad happens, don't know why good happens. We think somebody else causes it. We try to blame somebody. We try to sue this person and that person because we don't know Buddha's botany. So you start to learn cause and effect, and what it does stops you overtly, as I said, explicitly, it stops you from harming others because you don't want to get suffering in the future. But what you start to do is it loosens the grip of the poor self-pity me, like Lama Yeshe calls ego. When you start to abide by the laws of karma and you do it seriously, not just intellectually, you own what arises in front of you It's not just good luck and bad luck. You now know why there's a flower. You know why a good thing happens. You've created virtue. You know why the weeds pop up because you planted the weeds and you forgot to pull them out. So you own them instead of having a superstitious view of why they're there. So you start to become more accountable. You start to loosen the grip of ego, loosen the grip of attachment, of anger, of self-pity. You get less depressed. That's the consequence of just abiding by the laws of karma. That's already the first example of dependent arising. And already it's loosening the grip of ego grasping. It's profound. That's just cause and effect, you know. Then you get to the next scope, high school, like I said. And you start to look into the mind. Again, the overt teaching is you get sick of suffering. You don't want to know about attachment, the disgustingness of attachment and anger and pride and jealousy and depression and anxiety and fears. You're fed up with the pain of them all. Right now, forget what they cause you to do, but you then start to see how at this deeper level, how they're all conceptions, misconceptions. It's a shock to hear that anger is a misconception. It's hilarious. Anger is a state of mind, a conceptual story that over exaggerates the ugliness of something. Now, that doesn't mean, so like, Brian's partner's question, she sees in this company, there's corruption. She can see it. That's a fact, maybe. That's anger is not saying, when you give up anger, you don't chuck the baby out with the bathwater and say, oh, well, there's really no corruption. That's nonsense. This corruption is corruption is corruption. If you see a person kick a dog, he kicked a dog. That's a fact. That's not to do with anger. That's a fact. But this is a revelation when we can start to get it. When we start to see the delusional component of our emotions, this is a revelation when we really become a Buddhist. So the point is this. You see a guy kick a dog. You see a company being corrupt. That's fact. So what we assume is, therefore, it's natural to therefore get angry. How dare they do that? This innocent dog, this person, this evil man kicking the dog. Well, already you've dealt with karma back there in junior school. You wouldn't say that if you had the view of karma, because you know why there's corruption. You know why the guy kicks the dog, because they've got a karmic connection. The dog was harming in the past. The guy was the victim in the past. Now the guy's the oppressor and he kicks the dog back. You wouldn't even be saying, already you would have loosened the grip of anger, even by abiding by the laws of karma. But now you know you won't go into anger, but that doesn't mean you stop. That doesn't mean you chuck the baby out the bathwater and don't try to help the dog. As Martin Luther King said, it is good to find fault, but then you say, what can I do to help? And that's my point to Brian's partner. Don't just rave on about all the bad things that happen. The world is full of bad things happening. Anger just makes it worse. Anger, you shout and yell, this justification. How dare these evil people scream, shout, kill. What good is that? That just makes a mess of everything. We've got to distinguish between anger and simply seeing fault. Seeing fault is good. Then you can fix it if you can. But as soon as you get angry, you believe in conspiracy theories, you get angry, you talk about it all the time, you make up nonsense. Anger exaggerates. So you can't help the dog or the man. So we've got to start to know our minds here. This is in junior and high school. So unpacking and unraveling our minds. Like I said before, you've got to distinguish there are negative states of mind, positive states of mind, and all the mechanics, like in concentration and all those ones that you all need, whether you're a meditator or a murderer. So you've got to know the components of your mind and unpack and unravel them and identify them more precisely, instead of just these vague, big emotional feelings we have, You really start becoming a Buddhist when you get to high school, start being your own therapist. It's not a joke. It's incredibly sophisticated, clear, precise, hard work, unpacking and unraveling the thousands of conceptual stories in there. This is a huge job to be done. And this is why you have to understand Buddha's model of the mind. Very simply, there are neurotic, deluded, I-based, fear-based nonsense, fantasies made up. Then there are valid, reasonable, appropriate states of mind. So what is the key point about these two? The delusions are delusional because they're not in sync with reality, which is dependent arising. The virtues are valid because they are in sync with dependent arising, not totally until you realize emptiness. But there's some validity to virtues because they're not fantasies and not seeing things from there, seeing things as, there's a connectedness. So you check when I'm having a chat to my friend Lynn, let's say, and you see us together And you can see by our body language that we've got nice thoughts in our minds. I'm listening to her jokes. She listens to my jokes. I sympathize with her knee ache. She sympathizes with my headache. We've got compassion and we've got love in our minds. They're prevailing. Well, look at the consequence. When virtues are prevailing in your mind, look at what's happening. We are in sync with each other. There's a sense of interdependence. There's a sense of we're connected to each other. That's reality. The virtues are in sync with reality to some degree. That's why they cause happiness, because they're valid. Valid means they're in sync with reality, dependent arising. Now look at when suddenly Lynn accuses me of something and I get shocked, and you can see by the body language, you can see us kind of jerk away from each other, and you're going, oh my God, what happened there? Something's happened. And Lynn sort of accuses me and I accuse you, and how dare you say that? And she says, how dare you say that? Now what's arising in the mind? Anger, attachment, jealousy, resentment, that are fantasy nonsense, that over-exaggerate the badness, that are rooted in the ridiculous I, that have no basis in reality because they're driven by misconceptions. It's so clear. We learn this in high school. We're preparing for understanding emptiness later. Each step of the path leads us. That's why you can't just leap in at the end, you know. You can't just leap into physics without knowing math. One step at a time. It's like Brian, he had a moment of music, but you don't just stop clinging to the moment. Everybody's like that. I remember one fellow who'd been meditating for 37 years or something, and he was in tears. I'm still waiting for the experience of liberation to come. I mean, the poor man was in torture. It's like standing at the piano, keep playing until something happens. That's demented. There are methods out there to bloody well learn music that'll come every time. We're so ignorant when it comes to spiritual things. It's like you just sort of heard about making cakes. You've never known of recipes. So you bring a few apples and a bit of flour, you bring things, you put them all together. For 37 years, you work at trying to get a cake and nothing happens because you don't know there's a theory. Hear my point, people, through the shouts. So one time His Holiness was asked, how do you apply emptiness in daily life, Your Holiness? He said, it's easy. You simply see something from another point of view. That's dependent arising. The mind, when it's set in stone, like poor self-pity me before we start to practice, poor self-pity me who didn't ask to get born, set in stone, I this, I that, he this, she that. We're completely separate from the rest of the world. We see it through the lens of anger and attachment and fears and anxiety and jealousy. We're living in a nightmare, and it's all set in stone. And then the boyfriend looks at you the wrong way because you're so hungry to him to love you every second. You have a panic attack. Well, what has emptiness got to do with the price of fish? Because you're not seeing things as dependent arising. So just see it from another point of view. That's the miracle. That's how you apply emptiness, dependent arising. Things, see something from a different perspective. Nothing's set in stone. Our mummies told us that. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Our mummies told us that. These are profound truths. But the demands work. And so the first work is control the servants of your crazy mind. Live in vows. Practice purification every day. Put atomic bombs under the old habits. I mean, right back in junior school, you know, it's not good enough. It's not enough just to be a nice person, as Rinpoche says. You've got to practice morality in the context of living in vows of morality. Why? This is where we go into karma more detail, back to junior school. Everything we think and do and say sows a seed in our mind that ripens in the future as a fruit, either as happiness or suffering. That's it. Forget the third category of neutral. Don't worry about them. We only want happiness. We don't want suffering. So what's the solution? Stop causing suffering. Start causing happiness. So we've got to refrain from killing, stealing, jumping on the wrong partner, lying, etc., etc., etc. We're talking body and speech here, not even the mind yet. So that's fine. But when you create karma, the process of creating karma, every second you sow a seed in the mind by doing an action. Karma means action. But to really do it very powerfully, to create lots of virtuous karmic seeds, you know, 1,000 every thought you have, make them very valuable seeds, is to do them in the framework of living in vows. So what that means is this. We need to, even by the end of our life, we need bucket loads of delicious, intentional, karmic seeds of non-killing and of generosity, etc., in our bank vaults in order to get another decent human life. So the only time you create an action of killing, of non-killing, is when you have a thought, I will not kill. So there's got to be the object there, a mouse. Then you've got to have the thought, I will not kill, intention. Then you have the motivation, compassion within there. Then you do the action, and then the result is, you've saved the mouse. So there's 4 things in place when you do an action. 1 is the object, the mouse. 2 is your mind involved. 1 is intention. I will not kill the mouse. 2B is motivation, compassion. 3, you do the action. 4, a happy mouse, speaking simply. Now, the only time you're going to, maybe, if you don't meet a mouse every day, then all the time you're being a nice person, but you're not killing. But there's no thought to not kill. So intention is the meaning of the word karma. I will, volition is the real meaning of the word karma, mental action. So the only time you create the cause, you drop a karmic seed of non-killing into your non-killing bank vault. You need bucket loads of those at the time of death so that you get one of those to be triggered, which will give you another human life. The only time you pop a non-killing karmic seed into your bank vault is when you meet the mouse and have the intention, I will not kill. But if you don't meet a mouse and you don't have an intention, then there's no karma of non-killing created. So you're not creating virtuous karma most of the day. But if you live in the vow of non-killing, Buddha loves his vows. There's said to be some subtle form in the mind, within us that is visible to clairvoyance. It's so potent. So this is the point, as Lama Zopa says. One person could have a really good practice, but not have a vow not to kill. Another person merely has a vow not to kill, but doesn't do much other practice. The second person creates 1 billion times more virtuous karma every second and purifies their mind far more powerfully than the first person because of the power of vows. And we're talking psychological. So the person who's got a vow not to kill every second of the day, 24 hours a day, when you're sleeping, when you're doing other things, not even thinking about not killing, because you have a vow not to kill in your mind stream, every second of the day, you're ticking over dropping virtuous karmic seeds of non-killing into your bank vault, and you're putting atomic bombs under the tendency to kill. And in fact, you can't get ahead. You can't get ahead of the game until you've got vows, until you live in vows. This is so crucial for the Buddha. So, in this life, for example, this is a tragedy. Look at there's 4 ways our karma ripens, okay? 1 is a type of rebirth. So we won the lottery. It's not really, we worked hard. As a result of non-killing in the past, we got a human body. How incredible. But there are 3 other ways in this life that our karma from the past plays out in the present. And these are like the residual results left over. So we've got the second way our karma ripens is tendencies to think and do things. They're our personality traits. You're good at music. You're good at killing. You're good at lying. You're good at not killing. You're good at not lying. You're good at football. All your tendencies, your personality traits, they don't come from your mummy and daddy. They come from your past habits. They're a bunch of habits. The third way your karma ripens, the second way in this life, is called experiences, similar to the cause. All the stuff that happens to you, how people see you, how you're treated by others. And the 4th way is the environmental result, the way the very physical world impacts upon you. So all actions, all virtuous and all negative actions, all have these 4 results, not all at the same time. So 1, we've all got the human body in this case, in this room, we've all got a human body. That's the fruit of our past non-killing karma. But now look at the human realm. Look at the humans who have a tendency to kill. They've got a human body from not killing, but look at the tendency karma. The majority of humans on this planet, I would suggest, kill. Most religions say it's okay to kill. We kill humans, we kill dogs, we kill creatures, we kill lions, we kill ants, we kill vermin, we kill rats, we kill cockroaches. We kill. I mean, it's the commonest thing on the planet to kill. Most humans kill something. This is a terrible tragedy. That's the result of having been in the lower realms in the past. Your karma finished eventually, like a miracle. The petrol tank ran out and you got a human body. But because you didn't live in vows, you've still got the residual result left over of the habit to keep killing. So most humans kill. Look at them. What do you think it's going to result in? Most humans will go to the lower realms when they die from killing. This is the most tragic part of it. The third one is you get killed. You die young. Look at the humans who die young. Babies die. Young people die. Fetuses die. When I was 23, I had an abortion. That means some consciousness that had recently passed away ran like a magnet when I hopped into bed with this boy. I was in London, I was a hippie, I was 23. And then this consciousness came into my fallopian tube and met where the egg and sperm met. Well, that being created the cause to get a human body, the first kind of karma, like a miracle. They got a human life. But they had the third kind of karma from other karmic seeds of killing to die young. They died in the fetus. They got killed. One of the experiences similar to the cause of past killing is you die young or you get killed. Well, that sentient being died young and got killed by me due to that, because they hadn't purified all their karmic results. So killing, non-killing would ripen, 1, as a human birth, 2, as no thought to kill. You wake up in this life with no thought to kill. That's a rare thing. 3, you don't get killed and you don't die young. So far, that's us. 4, the environmental result of not killing is whatever you eat will nourish you. You won't get sick. The food is delicious. The water's good. Even if it's crummy food, you'll still get nourished. So those are the 4 results of non-killing, you know. And the 4 results of killing, you flip it over. A lower realm rebirth, or then the next 3 results, including in this life, a tendency to kill, you get killed, or you're weak and sick and everything harms you. Look at COVID-19. The environmental result of killing is that the very physical world itself harms you. Look at the world now. All the human beings are now the environment for us. We can't even kiss each other. We can't even touch each other. We'll get COVID-19. So that's environmental karma of killing, and it's worldwide. Look at it. And the people who get COVID-19 and die young, that's the fruit of killing as well. This is Buddha's analysis. So we need to live in vows. Protects us. Huge. Unbelievable. The difference is incredible. 24 hours a day you're living in vows. You're ticking over virtuous karma and purifying your mind. But not only that, that's the way to do the first level of practice, which is stop killing, stop lying, stop stealing. But that's not enough. You've also got to put atomic bombs under the habits from countless past lives of killing, lying, stealing, and that's purification. You've got to do purification every day. Lama Zopa says we're insane not to do it every day. That's how you practice junior school, and you get ahead of the game. Then you die, get decent human rebirth, keep on moving on your spiritual practice. Then you unpack and unravel your mind, get rid of the delusions, then you go to the university level, you get bodhicitta, then you go to the 6 perfections, and then you go to concentration, then you go to emptiness, and you get the hell out of samsara. I've run out of words. I've got an hour and 10 minutes left. What can I do?
I've got a couple of questions for you, Venerable.
Ask me questions.
There's one in the chat from Adele, and then David wants to ask a question as well, but I'll read out what Adele's written.
Good.
If emptiness is a characteristic of something that exists,
yeah,
could it be considered a feeling or just a characteristic? Or
not
is
emptiness is not a feeling? No. Feeling is the mind. Absence of pink, absence of intrinsic existence is not a mind. It's a characteristic of a thing that exists. It's got nothing else. It is ignorance that thinks there's pink there is in the mind. Ignorance that thinks there's an intrinsic I is in the mind. The ignorance is in the mind, but that fantasy mind makes up a thing that doesn't exist. The presence of pink on a black mug, the presence of an inherent I on a dependent arising person. No, of course it's not a feeling. Nothing to do with a feeling. What was the second option? A feeling or what? I can't hear you, darling. Unmute.
Is emptiness as a feeling delusional was the second bit, but I think you've probably...
Emptiness is a valid thing. It's not delusional. The mind has a delusion. Ignorance in the mind that believes in an intrinsic me, the ignorance is a delusion. The intrinsic me is something that the delusion has made up. So when you've realized emptiness of that intrinsic I, when you realize that intrinsic I doesn't exist and the ignorance is finished, and then no longer there's the appearance of an intrinsic me. Now you see the truth. It's just learning the meaning of these words is the real point, Adele. You have to learn the definition of all these words. That's why. Otherwise, it's very confusing language. I agree with you. What else? What else?
David has a question for you. He has his hand up. So do you want to...
Yes, David, please to me. Yes, David.
It's actually David's son.
Okay, good, David. Now, what's your name?
Ben.
Ben, okay, Ben, talk to me.
Very, very interesting. It goes back to just before the break when you were saying no I. What is the observer of us?
Perfect question. Exactly. Okay, we think the observer is the I, don't we? Because we say I pick up a cup, I, walk, I have pain. Exactly how we talk, David. So this is the tricky bit. It's fine to say that. It's a comfortable language for us to say those words. So without analysis, I will, like I said before, I will say, I have an ear and a nose. With no analysis, that's convenient language, is it not? Instead of me saying, the person known as Robina sitting here has an ear and a nose, that would be a valid statement, actually. But we use the convention of just saying I, but we make the mistake of embellishing that I. We think that in the same way that we think the word ear does in fact refer to this thing called here. That's correct. We think that the word nose does in fact refer to this, correct. But we then assume there's a third piece in there that is the referent object of the word I, and that's the mistake. So your question is then, what observes? Your mind observes, David. The mind observes. There's two parts. Okay, this is the point about each piece in that box of IKEA for the table. We have a labeled table, don't we? Okay, we have a label, same argument here. I'll say that's a thermos and we'll agree. And I'll say my thermos holds my tea. That we agree. There's no argument, but we've got to analyze, because in the same way we embellish the word I, here we embellish the word thermos. So we say, so then we can see thermos has parts. So there's one part, a circular base. There's another part, the sides. So these two. So we can say it's a flat-bottomed clay, a metal container. So now my thermos has a base. There's two words there. One is thermos, one is base. So let's find the thermos and let's find the base, because it's two things. So we'll take the base away. There's the base. So then where's the thermos? Now the base is gone. Where's the thermos, David? The base is now gone. Where's the thermos? There's no thermos, is there?
No thermos.
You just got a circular piece of metal. So thermos is merely the word we use to refer to those coming together of those parts. So the I is a convenient label. I do look at that thing. I hold the thermos. But now, okay, good. I hold the thermos, not wrong, but let's analyze which part of I. The hand holds the thermos, doesn't it? So the actual answer is the hand holds the thermos.
But,
then you go
sorry,
on.
You, Robina, have the thermos, but there is something else observing you.
Yeah, the mind. That's just the job of the mind.
Fine.
Each component of a person, each component of a thermos has its job.
Mm.
Each component of Robina, that's why the IKEA one is a good example. Each component in there, the figure does its job, the nose does its job, the eye does its job, the anger does its job, kindness does its job, intention. Each piece has a job. And one lot of those pieces is called the mind. One lot of those pieces is called the body. So the part that does the observing is the mind.
Thank you.
We conveniently say I, but the mind, now this is the next point now, David. So then we'll go, oh, thank God I've got a mind. No, same argument. Mind is merely a label we use for its parts. Oh, I've got anger, have I? No, anger is merely a label we use for its parts. Oh, you mean I've got, so everywhere we go, this is the dependent arising argument for everything that exists. That everything is a mere label that we use out of convenience to refer to its bits and pieces, but you're never going to find an intrinsic thing, ever. You can't.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, David. Very helpful. I mean, Ben. Good, okay. So what Buddha's telling us is this, and this is a kind of this is not the subtlest meaning yet. This comes to conclusions, more conclusions later. But the point is what Buddha's telling us is that believing in things that don't exist is why we suffer. I mean, this is totally surprising to us, but we sort of, in a sense, we can see it. Like I mentioned before, yesterday, I think, or the day before, if I believe that a £5 note is worth 50. It's a really simple example. I am delusional. I actually see 50 when I see 5. And so then naturally, because I think it's 50, I will have all these expectations of what I will get for my £50. So I'll build up these expectations and these fantasies, and I go to spend my £50. I go to the supermarket, I get £50 in my basket, and then I get to the checkout counter, and she says, give back 90% of this because she's only got £5 worth. I'll be devastated. It's simple. Why will I be devastated? Because I had false expectations. I didn't see reality. So that's every delusion over-exaggerates something. So attachment over-exaggerates the deliciousness of something, but the root delusion. So attachment over exaggerates the deliciousness of this thermos. The root delusion, ignorance, over exaggerates the very ontological status of the thing itself. Every delusion, as Lama Zopa says, decorates on top of what is there, layers upon layers upon layers of what of characteristics that aren't there. Now, this is also a delicious point that Rinpoche says. It's like the experience of the yogis. He says, when we've realized that from the side of the I, there's not an atom of existence from its own side. There's nothing there that you can point to that is an independent I. When we've realized that, meaning the emptiness of the I, he says, it's as if there is no I, but dependent arising, there is an I. But what does exist is so subtle, it's as if it doesn't exist. So it's this kind of annoying thing that there isn't something, but there is something. And you kind of say to Buddha, well, make up your mind, mate. Is there something or isn't there something? Because we're so absolute about it. But the point is, there is nothing from its own side, but there is something that does exist, but you can't find it. You can't point to it, but never, or as the yogis say, in their meditation, they're seeing directly the non-existence of the fantasy I. And then they open their eyes and they bop around in the ordinary conventional world and they see cups and toilets and dogs and mice. And they don't believe that they have any intrinsic nature. The cup, they see the pick up the cup of tea. They don't believe it has an intrinsic nature. They know it's empty from existence from its own side, but nevertheless, it functions exactly as we stated. It holds my tea. So emptiness doesn't counteract existence, and existence does not counteract emptiness. They refer to each other. They come to the same thing. That's what we have to realize. That's why the king of logics is dependent arising. We have to learn these words. It's like any words. If I hear, as soon as you start telling me about, internet, about, computer science, I'm lost. As soon as my friend John starts talking to me about it, because I don't know the language. It's not because I'm stupid. I'm just lazy and haven't learned the language. So don't think we're stupid because we can't understand these words. It's just because we have to learn the language. You've got to learn the terms, learn the words, anything like that. It's conceptuality. So learning the conceptuality, and then slowly by practicing thinking these thoughts, like learning science, like learning computer science, like learning how to make a cake, slowly you get familiar with this. And then slowly you put the concepts together and you begin to get the taste. That's why it's so important to understand the words first. Don't just make up your own definitions. Of course, we have to squeeze our brain, as Lama Yeshe says. So slowly, one step at a time. So Buddha's saying everything that exists, thermoses, cups, toilets, people, exist in the same way as dependent arisings and have no inherent nature. That everything's made by the mind, everything's constructed by the mind, everything's invented by the mind. But when we say that, we think, oh, well, it's only in the mind. We mean it doesn't really exist. It's the opposite for the Buddha. So, in Rinpoche, when he talks, Lama Zopa, in detail about, okay, now let's go to the subtlest level now. We haven't really looked at the subtlest level, which is the conclusion we come to after this analysis that we've been talking about. And the subtlest level of dependent arising is, the term is merely labeled. Merely labeled. So like I said, with the, when I was talking to Ben, the thermos, my thermos has a base. It's a simple example. My thermos has a base. Without analysis, that's a fact. I have an ear. Fact. So again, we do this one or many argument. I said two words here. I said thermos and I said base. So we've got to find two phenomena. I said I and I said ear. That means we've got to find two phenomena, if that's a valid statement, that are independent of each other, that are separate. So it's easy if I say I have a mala and a thermos. They're separate. And they're independent. But if I say I have an ear, they're separate. They're not separate, but they're dependent. So this is a more subtle one. So there is an I, but you can't point it out because the I, and this is the subtlest one, I, forget the mug, I is now, the subtlest one is that it's a name. Out of convenience, it's a name we give to those parts. So the I label, I can't be the parts. Because that's like saying, if my eye is my ear, and my eye is my nose, and my eye is my mouth, and my eye is my tongue and my neck, then that means they're all I. So why say I have an ear if they're the same thing? It's so silly. The label can't be the base. So we have a label and we have a base. We have thermos, and then we have the base of the label thermos, which is the parts. We have the label Robina, and we have the base, which is the parts, which is the mind and the body. So when we do the analysis of looking for the I, the piece called I among the parts, as my friend Pende says, a piece that walks hand in hand with the other parts, the boss part, like, you know, Ben's question, because we all assume there is an I in there whose job is to run the show. We say that, we think that, we feel that. That's the misconception. So what is the I then? This is what, again, His Holiness says. You won't, you know, the I is not empty of independent existence, independent from the parts, because you can't find it. You won't find it. That's not the real premise. The real premise is the I, thermos, computer, is empty of independent existence because it's a dependent arising. And finally, because it's merely labeled. So merely labeled means all there is the label. And of course, we hear that initially, it just sounds depressing. Oh, I'm just a name. I have no meaning. We hear it as nihilism. We see it almost seems like a joke to us. And that's why, why is because we're so totally believing there's more in there. We've embellished this me in there, this precious, special little thing, you know. So it doesn't mean you become nihilistic and say there's no I and therefore doesn't matter. Not like that. So the subtlest meaning of emptiness is we finally get emptiness when we've realized using dependent arising. But once you've realized emptiness, you then realize dependent arising. In other words, I got the example I used about the 5,000 pounds. Kerry and his cup, Kerry and the pink cup. When Kerry realizes the emptiness of pink, when we fixed his eyes, when he realizes that there is no pink there, that's the realization of emptiness, of a thing he thought was there that isn't. He doesn't just leave it there. He then realizes the truth, which is it's black. That's just a simple analogy of the two truths. The emptiness of pink means black thermos, and the black thermos means empty of pink thermos. It means that. We can see the two come together. So when we realized the emptiness of the independent I, when you can't find in here that piece called I that's got its own intrinsic character, like the ear and the nose have, all those thousands of parts in your IKEA box that all do the job fine of being Robina, but we think there's got to be an extra piece that is the Robina-ness. But when you discover there isn't that piece, and you put all the pieces together, and you can't find the separate piece called Robina, and suddenly Robina functions, you realize that you don't need an extra. It's an embellishment. You don't need an extra piece called a soul or an intrinsic I, or an essence, or an Atman. You don't need that. It's an embellishment. We've made it up. So what do you realize now? That's you realize there's not one of those, but now you realize dependent arising. Robina functions. Robina functions. She's functioning fine. And she's merely, and Robina is a convenient label for all those bits and pieces. And then you go, oh, well, I've got a piece, I've got a nose, I've got an ear. No, you haven't got a nose. It's the same. You start analyzing the nose, and you realize that that is a label also for its bits and pieces. Oh, you mean I've got a nostril? No, nostril is a mere label you use to refer to its bits and pieces. Oh, I've got inside of a nostril. No, that's a mere label. So where everything you turn to, everything is merely labeled. So it's like this cosmic kind of like a pretend. It's like they say, it's like an illusion. So you realize there's not an atom of anything that you analyze. You can't find anything there, but it still functions. So that it still functions is a major thing to understand. You put all those pieces together, of those pieces in the box, and you will get a perfectly functioning Robina. You don't need a Robinaness piece to plug in to make it real, and she will function just fine. The world, the same as the business of no creator. All the individual beings function just fine, creating their own suffering and their own happiness. Don't need a boss, don't need punishing, don't need rewarding. It's a schizophrenic idea. It's dualistic. It's a conspiracy theory. So there is a Robina. But what does exist is so subtle, it's as if there's not. There is no Robina. It's as if there's no Robina, but there is. So these two don't contradict each other. Emptiness reinforces existence, and existence reinforces emptiness. When we're going in that direction, we're moving towards the proper middle way, which is the middle way that the Buddha finally realizes when these two are cognized simultaneously. That's when we finally, even the greatest yogi, in their meditation, they see the truth. Out of meditation, they see all the phenomena of the universe, but they don't believe in them, but they still appear intrinsic. So when we finally got the two truths together, when we start to even begin to put them in the right direction, instead of going in the wrong direction, then we're on the right track. We'll never fall into the abyss of the great mistake. And this gives up fear. This is what's hilarious. Believing in things that don't exist is why we have fear. Believing your 5 pounds is 50 brings suffering every single day because you believe in a fantasy and you expect the fantasy and then you're devastated. That's life. We live in such suffering we can't even believe it because we're believing in lies, you know. So when we realize emptiness, there is no fear. There is no fear. This is an amazing psychological statement to make, you know. So I love the story of Lama Zopa. He's a little boy. He's his Sherpa, right? Lama Zopa's a Sherpa, born in 1945 or something. And he was recognized as a little boy as a reincarnation of the previous yogi called the Laudo Lama. Laudo is just a name. I never know for radishes or onions, one or the other. And when he was a little, in this previous life, he was known as Kunsang Yeshe. His name was Kunsang Yeshe. He was a Sherpa, humble Sherpa layman, you know, and he would go back and forth to Tibet selling salt or whatever they do. And then the last few years of his life, 20 years something, he lived in a little cave. He found this little hole in the wall, and it was where they used to store the radishes. So he kind of chucked the radishes out and moved in and became his cave, you know. And he's a great tantric yogi and spent the last 20-something years of his life with all his realizations. And of course, these great yogis can completely control their minds and go to very subtle levels and can realize all the truths of reality and can choose their future lives. That's what they do based on their bodhicitta, you know. So he got born as this little boy. I mean, there's this little Zopa. It wasn't his name then. His sister, she runs the place that now is the Laudo Cave, but it's now become a monastery and a retreat center. People go up there. We go up there every year. We're supposed to go in October, but I think we won't be able to do it. Maybe we can, we'll see. Raises money for this place. So it's the cave plus a monastery all around and about 30 rooms, and people go there for retreat and things. So anyway, what am I saying? So so his sister, she said she was about 6 when little Zopa was born. I can't think of his name then. And he said she always acted very different from other children. He always sat on a high box. He always ate his meals on his own. He'd make mud pie dorjies and mud pie bells. And he'd always talk about inviting all his previous benefactors to the party. So he had this, you know, clairvoyance. He remembered exactly who he was. And every time his mummy would turn her back, little Zopa would be gone, you know. So they'd find him crawling with his little bare bottom, crawling up this hill, this path that led to the cave. But he's always, there's a little spot they all called the resting spot. And he'd always be curled up there asleep, and they'd drag him home, you know. From the time he could talk, as soon as mummy turned her back, little Zopa's walking up the hill. Come home, she'd say. No, he'd say, that is my home. So anyway, he's always acting different and very odd and remembering who he was and saying, you know, basically saying he's the Laudo Lama. Because when they're young, these little reincarnations, they remember very freshly their past, you know. Lots of little children do, but people don't believe their stories. So then they forget as they get older. So anyway, she checked with the local Lama when he's a little boy, and he said, yes, it would seem he's a reincarnation of the Laudo Lama. So he got sent off to some monastery, you know, 8 hours away in Rowaling or somewhere. And Rinpoche always tells this story I've heard it in different ways. This oral tradition of telling stories, you know. So he was up there and he had a manager in a monastery or something, and there's a big river. And if you've been up there, I mean, I've been up a few times reading these treks, like really torrential water, you know. So there's these rickety bridges. So on the other side of the river, he's about 8 by now, it's about 1952 or something. And across the other side of the river, these weird looking people with, as he said, with pale colored eyes, straw colored hair, white people, obviously, never seen white people before. So he really wanted to meet them. So he brought his little bowl of potatoes. You can't go empty handed. And his manager didn't want him to go, but he was very determined. So he's walking on this rickety bridge, but he falls in with his potatoes. And so they don't teach them swimming up there, you know. So he's drowning. But this is how he told the story. He said, the head, not my head or I came to the surface for air. The head went to the surface for air, he said. And you can see his manager having a panic attack running up and down the bank. And then he said, and of course he's not swimming, he doesn't know how to swim. And then he said to himself, the person known as the Laudo Lama is about to die. But he said, I didn't know anything about emptiness, but there was no fear. But so basically what's happening is this, the fact that he would even say the words, the head, instead of I, or the person known as the Laudo Lama, this proves, and then there was no fear, this is the experiential result, the proof that in his mind, he has a realization of emptiness. Because you can't lose that once you've got it. Once you've got that you can never lose. You can even lose bodhicitta. You can't lose that. So that's from past life. And if he's a great tantric yogi, as he was said to be, that means he's gone complete control through the process of death. He knows exactly what he's doing and he chooses his future rebirth. That's exactly what they're capable of, you know. So as he said, he hadn't learned anything in those 8 years about emptiness, but the realization naturally was there, and the words he even used expressed that realization. So this is the point now, like, you know, Ben's point. What is it that decides? What is it that, you know, we all think it's I. There's a piece in there called I that does the work, that runs everything, that thinks things, that does things, that holds cups, that gets angry, that feels pain. So one of the practices we need to do when we're doing this type of analysis, you learn, I mean, even the way that all the Tibetans talk, when you study the mind, we say, I'm angry. They will say, there's anger. That's jealousy, and it does this. You analyze each piece and what it does, rather than I am angry and I'm jealous, because we identify so powerfully with that as being a component of this piece of me, you know. So you practice, this is so powerful, there's the anger, what is it saying? There's the jealousy, there's the love, there's the compassion, the pieces, you look at the pieces. Now this one of the head is very powerful, because you don't say my head or I, you analyze it as a piece. And the other one, the person known, that's a correct statement. The label Robina is not the same as the parts. It can't be. If Robina were the hand, then Robina and hand are synonymous. So why would I say I have a hand? It's absurd. And the definition of Robina is the name given to the combination of bodies and parts, including a hand. So how can Robina be the hand? You've got to analyze like this. So then we say so the correct statement is, I am the person known as Robina. I'm the person labeled as Robina. But as Geshe Tekchok said, you don't walk around saying, when someone says, what's your name? Oh, I'm the person known as Robina. Just shut up and be normal and say, I'm Robina. But don't believe it. I'm not Robina. I'm the person known as Robina. This is not just playing with words. This is serious. Because it loosens the grip and you're being more precise in seeing the pieces and what their job is. We're too vague. We're too general, you know. So that experience of Lama Zopa's is so powerful. There was no fear. This is inconceivable to us. So what is it, Mr. Darwin, wasn't it, who talked about instinct for survival or something? You know, he's observed animals and he's observed humans, and he's correct. He will see that when you get threatened, when you nearly drown, when you nearly get eaten by the lion, panic arises and you run away. We call it flight or fear, all these things, what a flight or something we say, all these things. So we take as a given, do we not, in our analyses in science and everything, we take it as a given that a normal person needs a healthy sense of self, a healthy sense of panic and fear, because without which, you know, we think if Lama Zopa didn't have fear, he would have sunk to the bottom of the river and thought, oh, well, I'm drowning, what the hell? That's nihilism. You don't need fear to know you're bloody well drowning. You need intelligence. Fear just makes a mess of it. Fear makes you panic and freak out and drag everybody else down to the bottom of the river while you're trying to save yourself. Fear is demented. Yes, it is real, but we all got it because we've got ego grasping. But you realize emptiness, honey, the fear's gone. You are in bliss. This is like hilarious to think this. We should pay $1 million for a course to learn this. We think, oh, that's just Buddha, this religion rubbish, you know. We have no idea what we're talking about. We're idiots. Buddha's the outrageous genius in what he's saying. Can you imagine having no fear? You'd be joyful. You wouldn't be stupid, you know, perfectly. So Lama Zopa is not stupid. You don't need fear to want to go to the top to get air. It's just kind of a natural thing, but it doesn't have to be driven by fear. It's common sense. It's nihilism just to drop at the bottom of the room and go, oh, what the hell, I'm going to die, you know. How stupid. The delusions are adventitious. The delusions are bells and whistles. The delusions are extra that we've dumped on top of what is there. And our job is to remove them. So first you control their servants in junior school, then you control the branch delusions in high school, then you get to the root delusion in university. Then you get the hell out of this mess and you add bodhicitta and you want to keep coming back to help other people to become fearless and radiant. Why do you think Dalai Lama's a happy guy after 75 years of never giving up? Well, 70 years. Since he's 15, he took on the job of running that country and he's never given up and he's perky and happy. We should be mind-boggled by the fact that he's a perky, happy guy at the age of 85. After his unbelievable suffering for all his entire life. We don't question, we just go, oh, that's just a Dalai Lama, you know. It's so outrageous, so arrogant. We should blow our minds. Why would Lama Zopa not have fear? Why is Lama Zopa, when he had his stroke, he was in bliss, laughing? The Catholic nuns at the hospital back in 2011 in Australia, I was there at the course when he had the stroke. They could not believe this weird Tibetan monk and all his monk friends who were laughing the whole time when he had a stroke, because he had no nonsense of a rubbish eye there and he only had compassion. We see the examples of all this, but we can't join the dots, you know. Emptiness is where you join the dots. What do you think, people? Ask some questions. Yes, Kimberly.
I've got a question in the chat for you.
Okay. Next, Kimberly. Go, darling. Yeah.
It's from Estefania, and she says, if you could recommend a practice to do every day, what would it be? Thank you.
You've got to do all. Control your body, control your speech, stop harming sentient beings, live in vows, do purification every day, work on your mind, develop compassion and realize emptiness. You can do all that in a day, baby, according to your capability. It's like saying, how am I going to become a physicist? You can't just do one thing. It's a whole process. It's a whole course. One step at a time. Each piece, do what you can. Control your body and speech. Don't harm others first. Next, do some purification every day. Next, work on your mind. Lessen the attachment, anger, jealousy, pride. Next, practice compassion. Next, get to the root of the problem. I'm not even being sarcastic. I'm being very sincere. But one step at a time, sweetheart. First step, maybe know it's possible. Then slowly, slowly. It's all there. We mightn't think it's integrated. It looks confusing. When I first heard the Lam Rim, I thought it was just confusing to wonder what the hell numbers I was talking about. It takes a while to see it experientially in an integrated way, you know, but it's all there. One step at a time. What else, people? That's not meant to be a cavalier answer, darling. It was a sincere answer. What else? Yes, Craig got a question, and Kimberly's got a question.
Craig and Kimberly and Louise,
Good.
a number of
Good,
people
darling.
hands up.
Ask me some questions. Okay.
Let me ask the one from the chat, and then other people can unmute and ask
Okay.
their own.
Go, darling.
This one is, please, can you talk some more about your purification practice?
Good, I'll do that. So there's 4 steps: regret, I think in your course notes, I think it's all in your course notes. I'm pretty sure I put it in your course notes. Let me just check. Get your course notes. I did a version for the phone and a version for the tablet. Let me just check. I put it in the course notes. I'm pretty sure I did. In the tablet version. Tablet, where is it?
Just to say, I put the course notes in the chat previously.
Please get, I mean, everything I've talked about today is in these course notes, okay? Every word I've said in these last 3 days is in these course notes. So please have a look at the course notes. So then all the practices are there. I'm trying to open it up and it won't open. What about this one? See if it opens. Well, it's taking a bit of time. I don't know.
Put them in the chat again, Venerable Robina.
Okay, please, people, they're all there. The course notes are all there. Now I'm trying to even open Word and it doesn't open. What's going wrong here? It's very strange. I'm sure it's in there.
They're in the chat on Zoom.
Tell the people, please, Lynn.
Yeah, Lynn, where are the course notes, please?
Everyone, I'm really hoping you to email them to everybody, Lynn, but what to do? Please, I mean, people just mightn't know they're there, darling. I really want them to get the course notes.
Oh, I see it. Yeah.
In the chat again just now. There's also a link to them on our website, on Jamia Leeds website. And if anybody can't access any of that, please send me your email in the chat, and you can send it directly just to me, and I will email you a copy.
Good.
So that way,
all these things I'm talking about are all in the course notes. And I think the purification practice as well, sweetheart, is in the course notes. But for some reason, I can't open my Acrobat and I can't open my Word. This is very peculiar. Can you please tell me, can somebody open up one of the versions and look in the contents and read out where it says karma? Please tell me. I can't open them. Very strange. Look in the contents.
Yes, there is karma, Venerable.
I don't see the purification practice in there, Venerable.
Oh God, it's not there. Okay, I should have done it. So maybe I'll send another version with the purification practice in it. Okay, Lynn, and you can tell people. So if you really want the purification practice, I will send another version to Lynn and she can give you that one. I will do it, but meanwhile, I'll talk about it for the person who asked. So but Lynn, and I detailed the 4 steps, okay, explaining exactly how to do it, plus the practice itself. I'll send a second version for that. Okay. Good. Let me just talk about it briefly here. Basically, there's no karma we can't change. There's no delusions we can't uproot. There's no actions we can't weaken in the mind, because things we do and say leave seeds in the mind. So we can purification is a question of sort of putting atomic bombs under those tendencies. So it's a psychological process, because karma is psychological. So karma is made by the mind. So the first step is regret. You acknowledge you did this and did that and killed this and shot your boyfriend, whatever you did, you know. And we're always doing something with our body and speech to harm others. So you think you do this at the end of the day. And you treat it like a very, I treat this like a very sort of, not like a holy thing, but like a psychological practice of being your own friend. Regret is not guilt. Regret is not, I shouldn't have done this. Regret is a very delighted acknowledgement that I did kill, I did steal. It's like I recognize I did eat sugar. Oh my God, what a fool. What can I do to fix it? I did kill, I did lie, I did badmouth. And then you regret all the things you've done since beginningless time. All those seeds are in your mind waiting to ripen as suffering. And hey, you don't want suffering. So you have this strong sense of regretting out of ignorance that we did those actions, and then out of compassion for yourself, basically. And then you think, well, what can I do about it? Whom can I turn to? Second step is reliance. So we turn to the doctor. Buddha's our doctor. So we visualize Buddha above our head. There's a particular way of doing the practice, and it's in those notes that I'll send. So, you know, you visualize Buddha above your head, a particular Buddha called Vajrasattva. Then you're in delight that you've got a doctor who's got methods that you can rely upon. Because it's not like Jesus who's going to forgive you, not like that. The doctor doesn't forgive you. The doctor gives you the methods and you do the work. The second part is you think of compassion for those you've harmed now. The first is like compassion for yourself. This next step is you have compassion for those you've harmed. The next one is you do the visualization, you do the practice of saying the mantra, of visualizing, purifying. It's a very tasty psychological practice of imagining you're purifying. And because your mind is what purifies, then it's what purifies. Your mind creates negativity. So you purify by creating positivity with your mind. Nothing more. And the fourth step is you make the resolve to change. I will not kill, I will not steal. And so it's just 4 steps, the 4 R's: regret, reliance, the remedy, and resolve. It's very brief, but there's no karma we can't change. And it's a powerful practice to end the day with. Then you wait, and then you go to bed with a happy mind. That's the rough summary. And I'll send you the course notes with that in it, sweetheart. So please, you must get it from and in. So what's the questions now? Who else has questions? Kimberly has a question. Who else has a question?
I have a question.
Go, Kimberly.
Can you hear me?
I can, sweetheart.
Okay, I've really messed up my screen trying to go to Google Documents, but so I'm just gonna assume this is gonna be fine. So we're talking about the mind labeling objects.
Yeah.
And the cognitive process that, like for me, automatically labels everything, and then that thing appears to exist from its own side.
Exactly, precisely.
And then I was curious, I've had some glimpses of emptiness
Good.
past, but it hasn't stuck.
Good. No, that's right. That's like Brian's moment of the same. Until you've practiced and practiced, it'll just come as moments. But that's encouraging, because you know you can eventually get it all the time the more you practice. That's right, Kimberly.
That would be so cool. But what I'm interested in is that the very action of the mind picking out objects as separate before it's labeled. So before I've got a TV across the room. So before my mind labels television, by virtue of labeling it, or even noticing things as separate objects, like in the absence of that process, would things even exist separately?
Okay, I mean, no, that's chucking the baby out the bathwater. This case is separate from your mind, Kimberly. Separate in this case, the more subtle level, we see the television. Okay, Lama Zopa uses a really simple example, and maybe it's even these course notes that I've got this. I've got a feeling I'll put that chapter in. It's from a recent book that Rinpoche asked me to put together of all the letters he's written to his prisoners. There's a very long letter there that he wrote all about this exact process. So what happens is this: you're a little girl, you go to school, and you haven't learned the alphabet yet. So the teacher puts on the blackboard or whiteboard, whatever it is, this design, isn't it? Two pieces here and a piece across. And she says, that is A. So the first thing that appears to you is those three lines, right? Isn't it? You don't know it's called A. I mean, I've got some Tibetan words on my wall here. I've been a Buddhist for 45, more than that, years. I still look at those Tibetan letters and all I see is shapes. I've never learned the Tibetan alphabet. It's very strange, I haven't. So that's a good example. Somebody says, well, that's Om. I have to sort of, which one's Om? I don't know. I can't tell. But so A is the same. Now what happens is the second you learned it was A, as Lama Zopa says, you see that shape again, but you forget that you labeled it A, you forget and you think the A comes from the shape. That's the main mistake we make. That's how we do everything. So you see that shape and your mummy says it's a television. She labels it television. And this is the point. If it were intrinsically a television, not separate from your mind, if it were a television that is separate from, if it were a television in itself, separate from your mind, you'd know it immediately. You'd see there's a television, but you'll never know it's a television until you're told the label television. But then you forget, and then you see the television, and in a millisecond, it appears to be in the television itself. That's how we live our lives. That's the mistake. It's a very subtle process. It's so quick. So the first practice we've got to do as Lama Zopa is stop believing in the labels. There is a television, but it's coming from your mind. This is a merely labeled one. It's a television. It functions as a television. It's still a television, but it's not. But it's made by your mind. So that's where they don't contradict each other.
So in interdependence, dependent on things, there isn't necessarily a natural separation between objects.
No, there is a separation. On conventional level, there is. There's a thermos that holds tea and there's a television that shows pictures. They can't be the same. They're separate phenomena in a conventional sense. You can't say that they don't all merge into oneness. That's not the separate that we're talking here. The separate we're talking here Yes, in this conventional sense here, when I discuss Robina having a nose and an ear, there is an ear that is separate from the nose. They're true. But then we think there's also a third component called eye that's also separate. That's not true. There is an eye, but not separate. That's that level of separate and dependent. But in the other one, this one here we're discussing is a more subtle one, that there's no television that's separate from your mind that labels it television, but it still functions as a television.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lama Zopa is the best one for. I mean, in this book, I'm sure I've got those teachings about the A, where we label things, and the way we attachment labels things, you know, delicious. And he talks a lot about this prisoner because this particular prisoner had a lot of sexual attachment. So he described how the way attachment makes up the story. So you can extrapolate and see how anger makes up a story as well. I understand. I think it's in the course notes. Can you tell me, Kerry, if that chapter, Kerry, can you look in the course notes and see if the chapter on emptiness and dependent arising, see if it's the one by Lama Zopa, just check it. I can't remember what I put in. You go to the chapter. It won't say in the contents. It'll say on the page itself who the author is.
But in the absence of I and the idea of a self in objects, in phenomenon, then there wouldn't be an experience of separateness of a thing and another thing.
No, but you're chucking the baby out the bathwater again. So okay, when you have got a realization of emptiness and you're in a subtle level of your mind, which is non-conceptual, there won't be appearances of anything. But when you come out into the world, out of your meditation, you see the world as it is. There are couches and toilets and cups, and they don't merge into one thing. That's absurd. That's just plain silly.
But subject and object, like the idea of a subject and an object.
Well, subject in this case is mind. So in that sense, the mind that says the word television is it's labeling that phenomenon as a television. You know, there's no television out there that's separate from the mind that labels it. You can argue like that it comes from the mind. It's not saying the television is your mind. There is a certain view in Buddhism that talks like that, but it's labeled by your mind. That's why we can learn. That's why Lama Zopa, when he had his stroke and all this suffering and pain, because he's a bodhisattva, and he's got no grasping at an intrinsic anything, he was in bliss. He was able to transform that pain as a way of him developing even more compassion for suffering sentient beings, because he's able to label it different. My friend Sunny, in the nightmare of that prison, was able to label it differently. That's the meaning of emptiness. And if prison had an intrinsic characteristic of being suffering, Sunny could never, ever have been happy in prison, but she became happy because she changed her labels. That's the point. That's why this emptiness is the key to understanding that nothing has an intrinsic nature. Therefore, you can decide to change your labels and change the label pain and change the label, all these labels. We can change them. That's advanced, but we can. Because if it were existing from its own side, you can only ever suffer. And if happiness were in the cake, you can only ever get happy when you eat cake, etc.
Yeah.
You understand?
That's profound. It's profound.
Yes, it is. It's delicious, isn't it?
It's in the book. It's in the book under chapter 3.
What is it called?
1 second. It's called Now Understanding Emptiness, Thinking About How the Self and Everything Else is Merely Labeled by the Mind, Subtlest Level of Dependent Arising, Lama Zopa.
Okay, that must be the one. So I think that's a chapter. That's great. Okay, good. Good. So I'll send another document with the purification and the practice in it as well. So what other questions, folks? Who was there, Lynn? More people, you said.
Yes, Louise has got her hand up. So would you
Good,
like?
Louise, talk to me, darling. Talk to me, sweetheart.
Yeah, so I've just got a question around when negative thoughts are arising. If we're able to kind of notice that before we grasp and start our conceptual stories,
that's right.
Should we then just cut it off, or would that be suppressing it?
No, darling,
or do we go through with some logic?
Oh, it all depends, Louise. It's a really good point. So, okay, good. What happens 90% of the time? Because let's say we're walking around our lives trying to be a good girl and not, many people don't show every single thing they think. Most of us don't show. Most of us keep them private. And occasionally we'll vomit out angry words, and we might, you understand, but 99% of the time we're trying to be nice girls. So we are suppressing. Many people, okay, sorry, start again. Some people have a tendency to vomit out whatever they feel. You understand? Look at the world. People who kill, steal, rape, lies, just go blah, blah with their mouths. They're uncontrolled behavior. That's how the world is. And some people have good behavior. And what they're doing is suppressing their thoughts. They're not noticing their thoughts. So when neither, the person who vomits out isn't noticing their thoughts either. And the person who's suppressing isn't, we're not either of us. There's no awareness. So the third option, so we either think you vomit it all out or you live in denial. They're the only two options we know. So the third option is the Buddha's, is becoming aware of what the hell is going on in the mind before it gets to the mouth. So that's what real practice is, when we start to hear the conceptual story that informs the emotion, when allowing it to come to the surface. And so we can see it. And when we're really practicing, doing exactly what you said. So sometimes, because the thoughts are uncontrolled, they're there 1,000 thoughts a second. We can't stop them. So we're going to be, our awareness and our intelligence, our good roommates, as I like to call them, are observing what the hell is going on, are observing what anger's saying, and jealousy, and if they're not that strong, the virtues can argue with the non-virtues and tell them to shut up. Sometimes it's enough to grab it and cut it, nip it in the bud. But if it's raging on for a long time and you haven't noticed, then you've got to argue with it. It's very intense. It's very strong and painful. That's being your own therapist. So you're using the virtuous, intelligent parts of your thoughts to argue with the crazies. Do you understand? That's day-to-day practice, Louise.
Yeah.
And as we keep continuing doing that and we get more and more concentration, that job gets more and more sophisticated. We get more and more subtle in our observing of thoughts, because they're layers and layers and layers and layers and layers of these thoughts. We've got to unpack and unravel them at an ever more sophisticated level. Do you understand?
Yeah. So if I can notice them straight away, cut them off. If it starts the conceptual story, use
Well, it's already pretty conceptual by now, sweetheart. Yeah. You've got to be really advanced to see them at a subtle level. Already the level we notice about, they're pretty emotional already. Most of us, we haven't got very good focus. So as we progress in our getting concentration, our ability to observe the thoughts at a more subtle level, this is the real skill we have to learn, darling. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Good. What else? What else, sweethearts? Lynn, who else was there?
I have a question.
Yes, Kerry.
Before, I don't know if you mentioned it during this course, but before you always used to mention about remembering your dreams. I wonder if that was always connected with emptiness. Could you explain a little bit about how dreams are going to help us with understanding?
Okay, that's interesting. I know, isn't it? Yeah, there's something about that. The Lamas would always say, to before you go to sleep, make a strong decision to see your dreams as dreams, not just to remember your dreams, but to be conscious while you're dreaming that you are dreaming. And many people have that experience. I know as a little girl, I had it a lot, not as I got older, That's a very good sign. So the Lamas uses as an analogy for life, and it sounds kind of a bit cosmic to us, because very well when you're in the middle of a dream and you're caught up in it, and there's no awareness that you're dreaming, you believe in everything you see. You believe in those appearances. You believe in it. I always remember a dream. This is an ordinary dream. I remember as a little girl, we were always poor. We never had enough things. There were 7 siblings. We always seemed to share everything. And you never had a thing on your own. You just didn't have it, And I remember I'd go to the beach and I'd see these little girls with buckets and spades. I'd be so envious of a bucket and spade, because I'd never have a bucket and spade for the beach. And I'd have a dream of my own bucket and spade, and I'd wake up and I'd be so disappointed. It wasn't a real bucket and spade, And you understand? We all understand this. If you have a nice dream, it's so delicious. Or if you wake up from a nightmare, you're so relieved it wasn't real. This is a really good analogy for life. So what the Lamas are getting at is this, that when you come into life and you can learn to be conscious of the thoughts, and as Lama Zopa says, you see the television, you see this, but you know that you're labeling it that it doesn't have this real nature. This is so powerful. So it's like not believing in what you're seeing. You don't mean, and this is why Kimberly's point is so important, you don't chuck the television out with the bathwater, say there's no television. That's not what's being said. There is a television, but not from its own side. So there is disappointment. I mean, the boyfriend did leave you. You have got broken neck. you know, the person, you did win $1 million, but when you got less attachment and less anger and less grasping, you use it, you see it, you understand it. It's a result of karma. It's more like a dream. You don't grasp like a vampire at it and then go up and down like a yo-yo. It's a very powerful analogy. They talk about seeing things like a dream, seeing things as like an illusion. It's still a real cup of tea. It's still $1 million that you won in the lottery. It is still a broken neck, but you got less junk labeled on top of it. You believe in it, the drama less. You don't become indifferent. You don't become kind of like bored. You actually become more compassionate, more powerful, more joyful. So learning to see life like a dream. It's a really good analogy. Is that what you mean, Kerry, isn't it? It's very helpful. What else, people? And it's continuous. The point is emptiness does not contradict existence, and existence does not contradict emptiness. This is the key to remember, like a broken record. That's the two truths together. Right now, we hear emptiness and we throw the baby out with the bathwater. We fall into the abyss of the great mistake. Oh, there's nothing. Or we hear something existing and we cling to it. Thank God there's something after all. These are the two extreme views that we have deep in our bones, that we believe in all the time. And we go like crazy people between these two extremes right now, you know. What else, people?
Aline has a question.
Good, Alina, darling. Talk to me.
Hi, Robina.
Hi, sweetheart.
It's actually linked to what Carrie was asking. Is it possible that I noticed this, the more I practice, I always had very vivid dreams and I always been able to remember them very well. But I noticed that lately, because my practice has been more intense, sometimes I had a feeling that it wasn't a dream, it was a memory. Is that a thing, or am I just overthinking it?
No, darling, it's completely possible. So the thing is, we have to understand the Vajrayana model. So the Vajrayana talks about, and this is described in the death process. We've got gross consciousness, which is the grosser level at which we function day to day, which is really the sensory consciousness based upon the gross body, this bag of bones. And that's all we posit in modern world. So when you stop breathing at death, we think you're dead. You're not dead yet. You've now got your subtler consciousness, which is all your thoughts. Of course, we have access to our thoughts at the grosser level, but we've got subtle consciousness, which is mental consciousness, and inextricably linked with a subtler physical level, which is the subtle nervous system, 72,000 subtle channels through which are coursing all the subtle wind energies or the prana, and connected inextricably to all our different states of mind, connected to these winds coursing through all these channels throughout our body. That's subtle consciousness and subtle body. And then we've got very subtle consciousness and very subtle body, which is literally all the physical components deconstructing, all the way down to a very subtle wind energy. And then all the different gross levels of consciousness to subtle consciousness, all deconstructing until we get to very subtle consciousness. And these are inextricably linked. That's the clear light mind and the subtle wind energy. And when then that leaves the body, programmed with all the karmic imprints of the past lives, we will then take a new rebirth. So the process of going to sleep is exactly the same as the process of dying, except that dying is more dramatic. Because when you stop breathing, at the time of death, you stop breathing, and then the subtle mind kicks in and you go through this process, and then eventually you leave the body and you wake up in another body. Well, in sleep, you go through this process, you stop breathing, your breathing becomes quiet, your grosser body ceases, your senses cease, and then you have this dream state. That's subtle mind. And people also in a coma, that's subtle mind. People who have out-of-body experiences, they're not really leaving their body, that's subtle mind. People who have clairvoyance, who see the future and the past, that's your capability of your subtle mind. So when you've got single point of concentration and you're completely in control of this process, you've accessed your subtle level of mind, which is just naturally means you can see the past and see the future. That's just natural part of the mind's capability. So of course it can very easily be subtle. Your dream mind is subtle mind. So that can easily be experiences of seeing things. Of course it can. Absolutely, no question. Okay.
And right now, because I'm new, it's only a few years that I'm in doing my practice. When I have these feelings that either I'm having a memory, I should just let it go, right? Do you
You
recommend anything?
could have a memory. Well, no, there's nothing wrong with having a memory. It's like having a memory when you're 7 years old. You remember the memory, you remember what happened, and you learn from it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Okay.
But it's also, if you have memories of a past life or memories of a certain event, it should be encouraging, because it shows us that we have got the potential to see more than what's in front of our face. This is just proving Buddha's point that our mind is super capable. And eventually we need clairvoyance, because you can't begin to benefit sentient beings until you've got clairvoyance. So you make an aspiration, may I continue to grow clairvoyance. When you get single point of concentration, you'll have it naturally. So you make the aspiration to get this so you can develop more wisdom to help people. I mean, it's always why I use the example of, the benefit of clairvoyance. It's not just because we're clever. And I mean, in the West, we think of it as some weird thing, and then we use it, and we're not very clear with it. No one knows how to get clairvoyance. They're kind of born with it, but it's pretty vague clairvoyance and pretty abstract and pretty not very trustworthy. But the proper clairvoyance is profound. I mean, you can't begin to benefit sentient beings. So there's always a story I tell about Lama Yeshe and my friend Harry. He was at Courtin Monastery. This is like in the early 80s, late 70s. And one of the monks there, the Sherpas, was very sick. And Harry had found a doctor to help him. And he told Lama Yeshe. Well, Lama was Harry's guru. So Lama just basically said, he doesn't need a doctor. He'll be okay. You leave him. So the monk got sicker and sicker. And then he eventually went up to his family as a Sherpa, and he died. Now that sounds like Lama Yeshe's being very cruel, isn't it? But Lama Lundup, the abbot, told Harry, well, of course, because of Lama's clairvoyance, which is a low-level realization, well before emptiness, well before bodhicitta, probably, not quite sure. Anyway, it's a low-level realization. We've had it in many lifetimes, Buddha says, because we've had single point of concentration in many lifetimes. So clairvoyance is the ability of your subtler mind to see beyond the gross level. The grosser conceptuality and gross senses have no capacity for that level of cognition, So as you progress, getting to a more subtle level of mind, you can cognize phenomena that the gross level can't, which is the past, the future, the minds of others. So as you increase all the way to Buddhahood, you have got infinite clairvoyance. You've got infinite wisdom. You see infinite past lives, infinite future. You've got this vast vision of seeing what exists. This is a natural state of every being when we become Buddha. So Lama Yeshe, Lama Lundup was saying, because of Lama's clairvoyance, and of course his wisdom, his emptiness, and his incredible bodhicitta, driven only by the wish to benefit sentient beings. That's why this stuff, emptiness and clairvoyance without bodhicitta, is a load of rubbish. It's just self-centered nonsense. It's meaningless. It's got to be for the wish to benefit others. So Lama could see clearly the karma that this monk created, which was the cause of this present suffering. He could see clearly that if he'd gotten a doctor, he would have gotten better and his life would have been fine, but he wouldn't have purified this particular heavy karma, and his next life would have been much, much worse suffering. So out of his clear wisdom and his enormous compassion for this monk to do whatever's best for this monk, it was better to not give him a doctor. He, in fact, died really well. And by dying earlier, he died well. He purified all the negative karma, and next life was fantastic. Now, who has that kind of wisdom, So it's absolutely vital to get clairvoyance. So every time you have that, you make the aspiration, may I get single point of concentration so I can get clairvoyance, so I can get wisdom and compassion, so I can be of quality benefit to sentient beings, Alina. That's it. That's the reason to have it. All right?
That's exactly the aspiration I've been doing with my.
Good, darling. Well done.
Exactly that.
Totally perfect. Totally perfect. So what else, people? Don't need time to go home. Maybe that's enough. What else? It'll do. I think it'll do, won't it, Lynn?
No one else has got their hand up, and there's nothing else in the chat.
All right. So I think we'll think, okay, we've done the whole Lam Rim, but we've done the Lam Rim in particular in relation to seeing how we're preparing our minds to realize emptiness. Everything is leading to it inexorably. And it's very helpful to see it like this. It's just instead of this bunch of weird medieval ideas plonked together in an incoherent package, So we just keep moving and be delighted in all these steps and things we've heard these last 3 days, all the things we've thought about, including me, all these seeds we've planted. They won't go astray, There's two things that occurs in the mind, the way the mind works. One is more like the qualitative one of karma. Everything you think and do and say based on the motivation sows certain kinds of seeds that will produce happiness or suffering. But the other thing about the mind is just this mere technical function, as Geshe Tashi says. It's like we're shooting a movie all day. every tiny thing we see, hear, taste, touch, smell, and think about is programmed in the mind, is left, it's like just left as an imprint in the mind, left as a memory. That's why we can have clairvoyance. So we just delight that all these things we've heard, maybe we don't remember them, have all, you know, they will, they've sown it, we've sown seeds in our mind. We're going to nourish these seeds with our practice, never giving up, one day at a time, 1 second at a time, being brave and reinterpreting things, understanding karma, understanding delusions, understanding the mind, understanding bodhicitta, understanding emptiness, slowly, 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 moving along, never giving up on this marvelous map that we've got, where it culminates with Buddhahood. We graduate as a Buddha, so we can be of natural benefit to others. Jang chup sem chog Rinpoche, ma ke panam ke gyo chik, ke panyam pa me pa yang, gong ne gong du pa wa shok, ke wa din yudu dag, lama sangye drub gyo ne, dro wa chikyang malupa, dehi sala ga pa shok.